You're live. So I could join.
Yeah.
So if you could close the door, thank you. We are slightly off course this morning. We were on the floor longer than we were supposed to. This is Senate Transportation. It's Tuesday, February 17th. And we have moved the agency off for their 10-year program outlook, and Jeremy is still here. We will get you in later. I want to thank the two of you for coming, and there's a few people. I'm going to update the committee just a little. A few weeks ago, the town of Morristown had kind of a pre-town meeting. They call it pie for breakfast. Is, you know, we all run on our stomach, and they got us all in the room. It was really clear to me many of the things that this committee has been struggling with, they're struggling with at the local level. We have struggled in here to find out what the need is for community. It's hit or miss across the state on what information is been collected about the cost increases for municipal projects. It's hit or miss on knowing what's going on with local roads in their community. We have not really had a good action plan to help communities and what to do about communities, where the money might come from. We've been talking about in this committee, we've had some talk about local option taxes and what's happening. The town of Morristown is talking about local option taxes. How does that feed into what's happening across the state and regionally with what's going on with town roads? We've been having that discussions. We haven't got a lot of good answers. We might hear some ideas in this. I would say to members of the committee, between now and March and April, when we put together the T-bill, if there are other examples that are like Morristown, I think we'd like to get them in. With that, I'm at this point going to open this up. You tell us what you've done, and I know you have a presentation. It was striking to me as I sat through the pre-town meeting how much what you're talking about is tracking with exactly the things we're struggling. So, welcome. You need to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll probably interrupt you with questions. We're good at that.
Yeah. My name is Jordan St. Ange, and I'm the Highway Superintendent and Road Commissioner for the town of Morristown.
Brent Raymond, Town Manager of Morristown.
Thank you all for taking the time to meet with us today. This presentation will provide some information on the struggles that Morristown, and I'm sure many other communities, have been facing with the maintenance costs of our aging infrastructure. So as I work through this information, please feel free to stop me for questions and discussions. The three main categories I'll talk about today are town highways, sidewalks, and bridges, and we'll focus on the town highways, both paved and gravel. In Morristown, we have 92.13 miles of town highway, and that's the highest road mileage in Lamoille County. It's the second highest when you compare it to Franklin County, and the fourth highest when compared to Chittenden County. Sidewalks, we have 9 miles, and bridges, we have 17 town maintained bridges, town owned and town maintained. So for Morristown, we have 36.8 miles of paved town highways, and that represents our biggest maintenance cost, and that would be the paving. So in 2025, we paved just under 4 miles, and we funded that with a 2 cents on the dollar special article and the depletion of our bridge and infrastructure fund. We're in a situation with that fund now where kind of struggling to come up with the town match for grants, and that's kind of where we're at in that situation now. So 42.4% of our paved town highways are still in poor to very poor condition, even after all our paving last year. So this is based off of a pavement condition assessment that we had done at the town level by GPI, and it costs around $15,000. It's very similar.
Tell us what GPI is.
Green Pedersen Incorporated, or I believe it's incorporated.
Give us a little background about who did the assessment.
So they're an engineering firm. The person that we worked with V-Trans for 15 plus years, known as an expert in roads. And when I came on board, I've been with Morristown for about 20 months. When I came on board, I could tell that our roads were in very poor condition, and our budget, the paving, was just wasn't even a drop in the bucket. So I hired GPI to do a road assessment, and they did what they called a windshield inspection. They drove all of our town roads. There is better technology out there, which, you know, measures bumps and scaling, et cetera, on roads. But this was a solution that we could use in a relatively quick fashion to be able to contract with them, so that I could give this information to my select board and educate the residents. So they drove all of our town roads and did what's called a windshield assessment. You want to get into some detail about what they looked for?
Yeah, they were looking at the shape of the road, potholes, surface cracking, deterioration, wheel rutting, you know, indicators of sub-base failure, things like that. That would give like an idea of the condition of the road.
Are you aware of what the state does? Because the state drives all the roads on a periodic basis and does a report for us. How close is this to that? Chairman, go.
Yeah, Jeremy Reed, Chief Engineer for V-Trans. So it's quite a bit different. The window assessment is just a visual observation based on what where I'm just talking to Jordan earlier today. Ours is much more quantified in the actual roughness of the road. So we have a special van that goes out there and actually measures the distortion of the road, both longitudinally and transverse. Whereas I think what GTI performed for Morristown is kind of a visual observation of road condition.
Go ahead.
And just to follow up on that, so did you compare the results of the V-Trans assessment versus the consultant's assessment? I mean, they may have come to very similar results.
Well, so the V-Trans
The road.
on state roads, our assessment was on the town highways.
Oh, so there's no
No
overlap.
overlap.
Too bad. Okay.
So when we originally, pardon me, when we originally approached the senator, we approached him with, you know, this data will be 2 years old come this summer. So we were looking for a resource that on an annual basis, we could continue the assessment so that we could project for capital planning more accurately. And we approached the senator about, we did know that V-Trans has a department or a couple of people that do this, but they don't do it for towns. And if they don't have the resources to do it, potentially the state could act as a, you know, on behalf of all of the municipalities and negotiate a contract so that all the municipalities would have a discounted rate with one of the firms that does the more detailed assessments. We're approaching him because there's so much cost just for the repair, but it's just as important to have as much data about with what needs to be repaired first and how can we keep the roads maintained so it doesn't cost the taxpayers more money.
Andy, you
I had a question about your 2 cents on the dollar. What do you mean by that?
It was an article, separate article where the residents voted to for an additional 2 cents tax.
Just 2 cents. I just didn't know what you meant like on the dollar.
That's a term that we use
Okay.
in municipal government.
Okay.
And it raised over $200,000 that we could put towards this past year, in addition to funds that we already had.
go ahead.
All right, so we have somewhat of a 5-year plan here, and that is that if we pave roughly 4 miles a year, we can address all of our poor and very poor roads in 4 more years. That will take roughly $800,000 a year in paving to do. So that equates to a 9.3% increase to the total town budget. And despite careful management of inflationary pressures, we're facing a 6.8% increase to our town budget this year, even without paving. So if we were to, absorb that as well as continue on with this paving, you'd be looking at a 16.1% increase to the town budget. In total, we have a $3.2 million backlog of paving. And this does not,
And when you say paving in the roads, you're just talking about paving. You're not talking about bridges, culverts,
that's right,
sidewalks, anything else.
that's right.
We're talking just paving.
And not only that, we're talking just paving poor to very poor condition. This does not account for the continued deterioration of roads that are good or fair. And really the most cost effective way to pave is to pave your roads when they're fair before they get poor and very poor. So this is really $3 million backlog is to just catch up. That's not even doing the regular maintenance.
Go ahead, Pat.
How many miles of paved road do you have in town?
36.8 up top.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay. Missed that. I was
Yep.
looking at the 15. So half of them, a little under half are very poor.
Yeah, so we have 92.13 total of town highways and 36.8 is paved. And the remainder is gravel.
Thank you.
So we aren't even talking about the gravel roads in town.
Yeah, I was gonna say the gravel
Well, I have,
needs work too.
yeah, I have some slides on that as well. It's really the focus of this is
Yeah.
on paved.
Okay.
Okay, so our only funding source outside of property taxes for paved roads is a Class 2 roadways grant program. So I thought we talked about that a little bit. So the maximum grant award for that is $200,000 with a 30% town match or 20% if you adopt the town and road bridge standards and have an MRGP map, which we do. So we're fortunate to have a 20% match there. That $200,000 is 25% of our current annual paving needs. And this is if we were awarded it on a yearly basis and plan to apply for it every year. And I haven't seen anything in the grant documents saying it, but I hear you're not likely to get that grant multiple years in a row. You're more on like a every 3-year basis that you'll be selected for that grant. So less than half of our paved roads, 41.85%, are actually Class 2, which means that 58% of our roads are not even eligible for this grant program, and they rely solely on property tax increases for paving. The average amount of Class 2 highways per town in Vermont, and this was according to the VTrans general statistics, is 10.3% or 10.3 miles rather. And of the nearly 12,000 miles of town highways in Vermont, only 24.4% are Class 2 and would be eligible for this grant. So looking into this, it got me to thinking, the big question is what percent of Vermont's paved town highways are eligible for the Class 2 roadway program? What percent are Class 3? What are Class 2? And so I started looking around and I found that there's very, very limited data on paved town highway mileage or condition statewide. So a pavement condition assessment for town highways would provide invaluable data for capital planning and allocating funds. We did work with the Lamoille County Planning Commission on some estimates, and we found that it would cost an estimated $71,000 for a pavement condition assessment and 3 years of database use for the entirety of Lamoille County, if that were to be like a pilot program. And there's, we know that VTrans does this in-house. We've used GPI in the past. There are several other contractors and firms that do this type of work. And we found some that they basically drive the road with a 360 camera and they give you a database and you can pull up a program on your computer that's just like Google Maps. And you can look at all your roads. You can index them by the pavement condition index. It measures the roads so you can build into it your different paving formulas. And it could actually calculate and estimate the cost to pave certain roads. And you can use it as a very valuable capital planning tool. Try not to get too into the weeds here, but I want to talk more about paving itself. And obviously the cost of paving is based on tonnage requirements, which is a pretty simple formula. The ideal, most cost-effective pavement treatment is a 3/4 inch paver shim overlay, but that's only for roads that are in good to fair condition. Before starting with the town of Morristown, I worked for Pike Industries, and my main job there was superintendent, and I would manage the New Hampshire DOT District 1 resurfacing contract on a yearly basis. And that was paving basically Franconia Notch North, about 80,000 ton project. And the vast majority of the work that we did was 3/4 inch paver shim overlays. And in speaking with the contract administrators and the engineers that I worked with, they said that generally speaking, on an 8-year cycle, that's what they would do with the roads, give them a 3/4 inch paver shim overlay. So if you let the condition fall even more from good to fair, and they fall into poor condition, now you're in a situation where you need to shim the road and then overlay it to get your shape back. That obviously takes more mix, and that's 266% more expensive than a paver shim overlay. And again, if you don't address it when it's poor and you let it become very poor, then you end up in a situation where you would need to reclaim the road or do some significant milling and surface profiling. And now you're 6 times more expensive than if you had just fixed it when it was in good to fair condition, and 227% more expensive than a shim and an overlay. So it kind of,
I assume you can't just keep doing the 3/4 overlay over time. You would just build up.
you can build up, then you do get to a point where you would have to mill some off. That is more prominent, like if you're going through a downtown location, you got curb reveals or catch basins. But for a lot of our roads that are, out through the woods, if you will, and residential, there's no curbing, nothing like that. You pave it, you shoulder gravel it, and you can go a long ways doing that before you have to start taking it down. When you're talking in downtown areas, you certainly can't do it as many times. This is a graph from the GPI presentation that we had, or part of our assessment, and their numbers are a little bit different, but the theory here is the same. And it's the worse the road gets, the more expensive it is to fix. They have a quote here talking about the strategy of fixing very poor condition roads instead of preserving good roads. And at the end here, they say the common analogy is changing the oil in your car is more effective than waiting for the engine to seize and replacing the engine. So that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about trying to get ahead of this, which is
I
obviously
usually talk about the roof on my house. If I let it leak and the sheetrock goes, I've cost myself a lot more money.
Exactly. Is there anything else we want to talk about on paved before we move on to gravel?
Let me keep telling your story. There'll be questions.
Good. So gravel highways, we have around 70 miles of gravel highways. Our main costs are ditching, culvert replacements, grading, and deburring. For ditching, we either stone line it or hydroseed it afterwards, and these are the material costs here. Last year, we replaced 16 culverts to the tune of about $20,000. Grading is a big cost for us, but fortunately, we have a good sized highway department. We have 2 graders. So that's not something where we really have to go out and buy anything. So we didn't include any costs there. And the same goes with deburring. So all these costs are based on materials only, with no labor or equipment included. And there are some great funding sources for our gravel roads. The Grants and Aid program, which is used for ditching hydrologically connected segments, anything that our road stormwater dumps into a brook, wetland, anything of the sort. And you can see here in fiscal year 25, we got 25,000 for that. And in fiscal year 26, we're looking at 42,000. So this is money that we get every year, and the amount is increasing. So that's obviously an incredibly valuable program for us. There's also
Oh, no, finish your sentence. I'm sorry.
no, I was going to move on to better roads, so we can certainly.
So I think a lot of that funding is A&R, which is good, because it's protecting the environment. So if you, it's cool that you have 2 graders. I'm jealous. But do you have a sense of what the total amount would be if you include the graders of the cost to maintain the gravel roads, or could you get that at some point?
We could, I'm sure we could get it at some point. It's equipment that, a grader is $400,000 piece of equipment. We have 2 of them that are, I believe, both paid off, and we do it within personnel. So we're not going out and buying anything other than fuel. when
Right,
doing it,
but if they're 10-year.
Yeah, we can do it that
we
way.
can certainly,
Yeah.
yeah, we have formulas for, our equipment costs and our labor costs per hour. I could certainly work up
Yeah.
something on how much time we spend grading.
It's relative to stormwater utilities, which I won't get into now, but I will with you sometime.
You're giving up a chance to talk about stuff.
Yeah, I know, I'm holding back.
Stormwater's a big thing,
I know.
especially when you talk about in town. That's something that
Right.
I'm not gonna touch about here. It's not really transportation related, but.
And it's a really good revenue source, but we'll talk about that
Yeah.
later in a different place. But the stone line ditches, I've heard different things about those because when you put them in, they're great, but the maintenance is challenging. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I believe according to the state standards, if you have stone in that ditch, even if it gets covered, it's still a stone line ditch and it's still very beneficial. And it stops the road from scouring. It starts to, I believe, lose its ability to kind of make the white water and pull the sediment out before it gets into the brooks and streams. But in terms of maintaining the integrity of the road, even if they're covered, they're still good as long as they're deep enough.
Okay,
So we
Good.
dig them down pretty deep and put them in. It's great for our roads.
when they were,
Residents will complain because they can be very deep. So it's a
And
matter
if you
of,
go off, it's not very fun.
We refer to it as a traffic calming measure. It slows the cars down.
I hope we don't go that by me, but. That's-
Pat is.
On the culverts, those $1,200 per culvert, those must be driveway culverts, right? Or
We've been
Actual-
using a new, those are road culverts and that would be two 20-foot sticks I believe I have priced out here is the 24-inch culvert. We've been
Okay.
experimenting with some new manufacturers that.
it seems relatively cheap.
It is compared to the, we can talk about culverts, but
Yeah.
there's the gray culvert that you see, that's the latest and greatest. That's some really expensive stuff.
Right.
We found an alternative that I believe it's still a watertight connection. It's a very sturdy product and so they've been able to save some costs there with their culvert purchases.
You remind me of deburning.
Yeah, so as we go by and grade or you go through and you plow, you end up with a little edge and that can catch water and create a secondary ditch. So the way that we've been doing it this past year is go by with a grader, pull all that in the middle of the road, grab with the loader, put it in a truck and get it out. So the water can shut off the road.
Go ahead.
Better Roads Grant, category B, C, and D. This is more grant funding that's available for less than 36-inch culverts, stream bank and slope stabilization, and box culverts and culverts over 36. They have the maximum award in the grant amounts listed here. So we have some good funding sources available for ditching and some good funding sources available for replacing culverts. And again, the grants and aid is great because we know we're going to get it. Whereas, these grants, they're competitive. They're very competitive. So we apply for them every year, but you have to cross your fingers at some point there.
and, as municipal managers, we're always looking to plan ahead to, forecast what we need for budget. And, in Lamoille County, we're getting hit regularly with storms. And, so this past year, we didn't have any FEMA level recognized storms, but in May, we had heavy localized rain. And it put our highway department 6 weeks behind schedule with repair of roads. And I know it's not on your presentation, but if you could share a little bit of information about, I think this really correlates with wanting more data, because even with data and the state standards for maintaining roads, it's one storm that's not even considered FEMA level can wipe out our roads. And if you could just share a little bit with.
Yeah, we had all these great big plans for our summer maintenance and we had our roads in really good condition. We were getting ready to start applying some chloride and getting them stiffened up. And over the weekend, we had a massive rainstorm that washed out some culvert. I don't remember the exact dollars or miles that were affected. But it completely rewrote the book on our plan for the summer. So we ended up spending about close to 6 weeks doing repairs from that storm, as opposed to, culverts and ditching that we had planned. So Mother Nature certainly helps us with our priorities often with gravel roads and it makes it difficult to plan. Moving on to sidewalks, if there's no more gravel road questions. We have 47,000 feet or 9 miles of sidewalk. In 2025, we replaced 1,100 feet of sidewalk, but 600 is still in poor or in very poor condition. And we didn't have any sort of GPI assessment done on this. This is just our in-house guys driving around and looking at the condition. LCPC helped out as well. That's correct. Thank you. They helped out mapping it. So our plan here is to replace 1,500 feet per year, and that'll again get us caught up in 4 more years. And that's roughly $150,000 a year in sidewalk repairs, or a 1.7% increase to the town budget. Again, facing a 6.8% increase without any of this stuff. And if we were to do paving and sidewalks, full-blown catch-up 4-year plan, you'd be looking at a 17.8% increase to the municipal taxes, the property taxes. There's a $600 backlog of sidewalk work that needs to be done, and this did not account for the continued deterioration.
Do you maintain them in the winter?
We do. We were in a position where some of them were so rough we couldn't physically plow them in the winter. This past year with this 11,000 feet, we focused on that and got it to where all of our sidewalks can be maintained year round.
That's terrific. And just a comment, so then that is a mode of transportation. It's not just something nice to have. Thank you.
Yeah, they're definitely, they get used a lot too. It's a great transportation system. It's a big draw to living in the village is being able to walk. So it's nice to have them all functioning year round again. Our funding source here outside of property taxes is a small scale bike ped grant, and that is a $150,000 project match with a 50% town match. So the max award here is $75,000. We did recently receive downtown designation, and so we are also working on some grant opportunities through there. But this is the one where we have been successful, and we do have a project plan this coming summer that's going to be utilizing this grant, preparing some sidewalks and ADA accessibility and connectivity. And to touch on bridges. So Morristown has 17 town-owned bridges, and most all of these are noted on V-Trans bridge reports of needing repairs, including several that need significant work, including repair to the bridge deck itself or the abutments. We recently held a competitive bid process to paint one of our bridges, and the low bid there was $286,000 to paint it. So you can imagine once you start getting into stripping the deck off or excavating around the abutments, bridges are just, as I'm sure you're all aware, very, very costly to work on and maintain. So our funding source here is the Town Highway Structures Program, which is a $200,000 max award, 20% match, or in our instance, a 10% match, which, as you can see, doesn't cover the cost to paint one of our bridges. So in summary, with our paved town highways, the current funding levels fall short of our needs, and only 25% of our current annual costs are available. And that is, again, if awarded, and it sounds like we're not going to be able to get that grant every year. The current Class 2 roadway program guidelines exclude the majority of Morristown's paved highways from this funding, and more data on paved town highways statewide is certainly needed. But the gravel,
I know you covered this in your earlier slide, but I already forgot. Why is that not all of the Class 2 roadways are eligible?
All Class 2 highways are, all paved town highways are not. So in our instance, we have a majority of our paved roads are actually Class 3 town highways. So they're not eligible for this paving.
They have to do the different program, the different grant program.
I'm not aware of any grant programs available for paving Class 3 town highways.
I think it highlights for me that if we could ever get to a place where we weren't behind the 8 ball on overall transportation, if we ever were, that some review of all of the programs that go to towns is really needed to take a look at what we do to help communities and what's applicable across the board.
Just
clarification, maybe somebody from AMT or maybe you know, but class 2 paving doesn't allow for a class 3 road. How about just plain town highway 8? Is there a lot of money in that would allow for
Yeah.
that?
They get a straight check from the state.
But you could use that for town, for class 3.
Sure.
You could use it.
Wanted to.
You could use it for class 3. Right now, we apply it. We have a $3.2 million operating budget just for maintenance. So we apply it to that. So
How much of your 3.2 million budget is town highway 8?
around 200,000. Little over 200,000.
So of $3.2 million, the state helps you with 200,000.
6%.
Yep.
So those numbers are in your score.
I don't have the state aid to town highways in here. No.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you both so much for coming and presenting to us. I think it feels a little deja vu for me because I've had multiple communities essentially express the same with slightly different numbers to what you've described, your experience. And I think the one thing I just want to reflect on and that I'm disappointed by is while I appreciate both of you being here, and the expressed interest of many of our communities, we don't have a solution that will address any of your concerns at all. In fact, your concerns are only going to deepen exponentially because the Agency of Transportation has not sought outside revenue sources for a long time. So we are being faced with a $33 million shortfall for upcoming. And then when we look at the state money, we're seeing it decline to the point of where we are going to have 48% very poor road quality by, I think it was 2036 was what we saw. And that's for state roads. And you're receiving far less financial support than state roads. So I appreciate this, but I just feel a lot of tension with us kind of having you be paraded out here to tell us your problem, but we have no solution. And I feel that is a painful reality that we're experiencing and something that I'm hearing from my community. So I wanted to ask, are you feeling that it is time that we've raised revenue as a state? I mean, you're making the hard decision to raise revenue on the local level. What would you want the Agency of Transportation to do in terms of revenue?
Well,
So, Matt,
well, I think you should jump in and start to and explain what you are doing.
sure.
Yeah, they're raising a 2 cent on their local, but what would they want us to
You
do?
know, they're finished and they're gonna start talking about where they're headed as a community.
So, the town of Morristown, since before I arrived as town manager, select board, was looking at local option tax. And we had EPR, Jeff Carr's, firm do a study, and conservatively, the town could raise $1.2 million a year if all three classifications of LOT were approved by the voters. So that'll be on the ballot in March. There's been a lot of pushback. People are very concerned. They feel overtaxed. You know, the education tax, town tax. You know, this past year we were able to keep our expenses at just above 50 bips. You know, 0.5%, approximately 56 bips. And despite keeping those expenses that low, the town is looking at a 6.8% year-over-year increase. So what we've seen is our revenues are dropping, whether it be the pilot program and other programs from the state, they're dropping. So we're needing to look at, as a municipality, at solutions, and LOT is the obvious one. But we're very concerned that the residents don't understand that. So first of all, I want to thank you all very much for inviting us here so that we can discuss it, and there can hopefully be more information provided to Vermonters statewide. Morristown is fortunate if the residents vote for it, that, you know, we can be bringing in approximately $1.2 million conservatively in the first fiscal year, and 75% of that minimum can go towards offsetting our our roads infrastructure. We also have other infrastructure needs. We have a police department, we have EMS, we have a fire department. Our fire department is costing taxpayers additional money because the bays are too short, you know, when it was built in, I don't know what year, the sixties. Our police department, the conditions are inadequate there. So we have lots of other capital projects that need to be addressed, but just our paved roads alone could consume 75% or more if the LOT is passed for the next 4 to 5 years. And then once we're able to get our roads up into more fair condition, you know, who knows what the annual cost will be after that. But outside of my, to answer your question, outside of my role as town manager, I would suggest that any federal money we're leaving on the table as a state is, as a taxpayer, difficult to understand. But I understand what's going on probably more than a lot of state residents, but that would, in my opinion, be the first step at the state level of how to address these issues, is to capture as many federal dollars as possible.
Well said. Yeah, no, you,
I
you were
and
right.
totally
Sometimes
appreciate,
you're
I totally appreciate your question.
Can I ask one other random?
Go ahead.
Okay, so my only other, just in your, you had kind of talked about before, but I didn't want to interrupt. Something that's happening in our communities is that folks are giving up roads. They're just no longer maintaining them. The town has said we are stopping. But it looked like to me that your gravel costs are greater than your paved road costs. Am I understanding that correctly?
Paved road costs are definitely higher.
Okay.
Maybe
I missed it. I'll go back and look at your slide. So are you making that transition then? Are you seeing going from are you letting roads basically go unmaintained? Where was do you have one?
We have 19 roads in Morristown that we've identified as potentially discontinuing.
Oh.
And but the statutes for discontinuing roads are there's a process. And so the select board has not made any decisions. We're starting with 3 roads. One of those is a class 4 and the other 2 are class 3. And how we chose those first 3 was one resident on the class 4 wanted us to discontinue it. And the other 2 are class 3, but they have, you know, just a couple of lots on it, because the costs for discontinuance are pretty expensive. You need to engage an attorney, they need to do title searches. And so it's a long process and it can be a costly process.
Do you think that that's a strategy, since what we're hearing pretty obviously is there's less money, we're going to continue to have less money, and there's not political will to raise revenue other than at the local side? Do you see that as a compelling strategy that we could make easier? Because we're going to have to either lower Vermonters' expectations or choose strategically what roads to move away from. You know, it's kind of the same conversation we are having with education too. I think we need to be very upfront and say, you are going to have worse road quality, you're going to have fewer paved roads, or you're going to have less maintained peripheral roads. And I think the easiest solution to that is the less maintained peripheral roads, which you're kind of describing your process. So and maybe at some point we can have a conversation about how to ease the ability to release roads for communities so that you are able to actually prioritize. It's a really nasty conversation. I don't want to have that conversation, but I'm just not seeing us meeting their needs. So I'd like to have a way that they're not having to pay an attorney to just try not to lose. Yeah. So there you go. Thank you. That was my
I totally appreciate it. And I totally appreciate Morristown and the question about local option taxes, and that you have a choice. Has anybody ever done any estimate of how many people come to Morrisville to work in a day?
So that was part of Jeff Carr's analysis, was sales within the community and looking at anchor stores, because we are an anchor for the county. You know, we're not Stowe. We don't have those tourist dollars coming in, but we don't have the bed base of hotels and bed and breakfasts, et cetera. But we do have some stores where people from the county come to shop. So I can share that with you senators and point out where they get into that. I'm not sure how detailed it is. We also are very fortunate in Morristown to have, you know, companies. We have a multinational company that, you know, manufactures stoves. We have Concept 2. So we have an industry in Morristown that, you know, a lot of communities in the state would feel very fortunate to have, you know, good paying jobs. And that's how we can argue that LOT will be beneficial to our residents, because it offsets those costs with people that are coming into town for shopping and for work from other communities.
Well, to get at the point that the senator from Windsor just made, many of those people in those smaller communities don't have this option. And so as you know, my worry is at some degree, and I totally think it's absolutely logical what you're doing, absolutely the appropriate thing for Morristown to consider. But if I'm in Eden, I look at it and go, what would they do? And at some level, I think it brings up the question that Senator White just brought up. The balance is really tough here. So, are you guys close to? I
Yep.
do have,
We're on the same list.
because I do have a next question.
Okay.
The question of, and you brushed up against it, and we do have the head of the planning commission here. And, you know, after some conversations that we've all had, there's a severe lack statewide of information about what's going on with towns, and a huge lack of information around what there is for help out there, the programs that you outline. You know, I totally appreciate Town Highway 8 and appreciate that there's a formula, and this year there's a 2% increase in it, but a 2% increase when you get 200,000 on a $3.2 million budget, and it doesn't deal is, I think it all speaks to itself. Information is key for us to be able to move ahead. And batting around ideas about, as a region, what we would do. I think you've had some conversation with our planning commission. So if you could kick that off, and we might let Tasha say a few words about where they are and what the TAC is doing right now.
Sure. So also just to expand on what you just said, Senator, information also is a cost saver for taxpayers, because when you can assess conditions before they become poor or very poor and prioritize those roads, it creates a cost savings. So we approached Tasha and her team at LCPC, and basically with the same requests we had of you is, you know, if the state can't negotiate on behalf of all the municipalities of the state for some sort of reduced cost for this data for capital planning, let's talk with our local regional planning commission. And Tasha was very open. I'll give up my seat, Tasha, if you want to come over here.
Well, there's another chair there. She could.
Whatever works.
I'll
Sit. Okay, for the record, I'm Tasha Wallace, Executive Director of the Lemoyle County Planning Commission. It's nice to be here today. So just a little background. I think you all know, in the absence of county government, that we work closely with communities on transportation projects, mostly through our transportation planning work with the Agency of Transportation and other grant sources.
But as these guys were speaking, like with the gravel roads, we do road erosion inventories for the communities. We do culvert inventories. We do sidewalk inventories. We work through the municipal roads general permit and a lot of different elements. But we haven't had the capacity to provide data on the paving. I do know just from our transportation planner that the town of Cambridge is very interested in this issue, and they have less staff than Morristown. Eric, the town administrator, also does the roads. The town of Waterville, which is 300 and some odd people, is trying to figure out how to get data on their paved roads, and they don't have town staff, you know? And likewise, Hyde Park is interested in the issue. And as Brent said, that it's so important to have the data for these small towns who have to prioritize their spending, and they have limited funds, and they just don't have the staff to go out and assess the road. You have a nice professional crew, so you're ahead of the game and you still want help. And these smaller communities really need this data. And it really feels like having the data can really drive good decisions at the town level and at the state level in terms of the allocation of resources. So I think data would be great on a county basis or however it's gathered. Also, I'd love to see one of those cool vans with the cameras and like a little Google car kind of zipping down the roads. So, and I'm happy to answer any questions about it.
I think most of the people around the table but talk a little bit about the TAC and what the TAC does and where you are with the TAC right now.
Okay, great. And so as part of our role, we have a transportation advisory committee, which includes appointees from all the municipalities. Over time that they've had several roles. They play an important role in prioritization of local projects. Back when there was money, we actually had a great success in that Eden had a double culvert that failed. And all the towns worked together and agreed this was a priority for the region, and that project was funded. There's less engagement with the prioritization process right now, just because there isn't the money to further projects. So new projects aren't entering the system. But the Transportation Advisory Committee also works closely with our planner and the road foreman. If you really, I think you can agree with this, if you really want to know what's happening with the roads in a community or in a county, is get the road foreman together, and they just have so much insight on what's missing and what they need. But the Transportation Advisory Committee, I think, plays such an important role in getting us information. We share that with the Agency of Transportation, but really trying to identify what's needed. And the needs are huge out there, certainly in the region.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, yes, I have heard, in my area, in my district, the TAC has been told that prioritization isn't going to happen this year. And I heard it was like 5 years that's been the case. I don't know what the history is, but
I'm looking at Michelle for a number.
yeah, well, they'll talk about it
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
But can you, to me, it's even more important if we don't have money that the towns prioritize, because what you said maybe 5 years ago, you would say something else now. The towns would look at the existing condition, and things may have changed, especially with all the storms that have happened. So can you just talk about the value of updated prioritization at the town level and how that is just an important thing to do, at least in my opinions?
Sure. And it's Lamoille County, and the
Yeah.
water comes and the road might not be there tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I super appreciate that perspective. And so the prioritization is really important. I think that the TAC just has been a little stuck because for when they were continuing to do it and there wasn't money available, it was all very hypothetical to say, hey, we can identify these great projects and we'll get them on the list and they're number 207, have a nice day. So,
Right.
but we would love to see a lot more activity there. And we appreciate the partnership with V-Trans, because the truth is that, you know, having any of these projects done is super important.
Right.
And it's these local officials, the local appointees who really, you know, have the information. But they're missing a lot of information. I mean, I love that we've started talking about data to help drive this decision making, because that's, especially with roads, like, you know, it's not all the theoretical stuff, it's what you see in front of you and, you know, what's happening.
Thank you. And so something that towns in my area, not just my district, but other districts are going to prioritize on their own anyway, and just send the information to V-Trans in the hopes that it would be helpful. Is that something that would be a benefit?
Sure,
to
sure,
you?
sure. Yeah, I think it's really good to have those discussions. And I think too, that the exchange of information between the communities is really so important. We've started holding twice a year meetings of the select boards from the county, and that's been great. I've seen Brent like corner a number of different town managers or administrators to talk about common issues, and because I think we really need to identify those areas where we can cooperate and make it easier.
Yes, thank you very much. I agree.
So we're coming within 10 minutes or so of the end of the time. I do see Dawn on there. Did Leah leave?
Lee's on there, just no
Oh.
camera.
Yes, I'm here.
You're both on the select board. Introduce yourselves, and just if you have anything you'd like to add, we've got about 4 or 5 minutes.
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, this is Don McDowell. I'm chair of the Morristown Select Board. So obviously very interested in this conversation, and thank you for putting Morristown in the spotlight. We do have some obviously significant needs, and I'm really glad that you guys are focusing on this. It is frustrating, of course, for all of us that there's not more funding available for the infrastructure needs that we have in Morristown. And, you know, this is true of so many towns around the state. And the other thing, I'm just glad that LOT has come to the forefront. Brent spoke about this, and the local options tax is going to be really important to Morristown, and hopefully the voters will push it across the finish line here in a couple of weeks, and we can take advantage of that funding and use that towards many of our infrastructure needs, not just paving and sidewalks and bridges and culverts, but others that Brent alluded to. So anyways, thank you very much. I'm not going to reiterate what Brent and Jordan have already talked about quite a bit, but I appreciate the time you're putting forward on this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Leah, do you want to add anything?
Yes, I'm Leah Hollenberger, and I was appointed to the select board back in October. I want to thank the committee for letting Morristown share our story, and I want to reiterate how important the data has been for helping us to explain to our residents why the local tax is so important. Having that data really quantifies our need. It lets us attach real dollars to it and explain the situation we're in, as tough as it is with our residents. So we're really have a lot of hopes for that local option tax.
Thank you both. And I would, before we're going to take a 5-minute break, but before we take the break, I would like to say, and I think it highlights often, but I look at my small county and I represent 10 towns. 2 of them, my hometown and Morristown, have really an option with, or have some option with local option taxes to be able to at least address a piece of their needs. There are 10 other towns that don't. And the lack of information hinders us to have a real discussion about the needs in communities that are out there. But would you want to add anything at the end or?
No, I think you touched on it. I think the data really would be hugely helpful because on a yearly basis, because our assessment that we had done it's already almost 2 years old. It's already becoming old news. These roads their condition is changing constantly every spring. So we appreciate the time, and it's awesome that the conversation is going. And I think the more that we can get some data out of it, be a really great start.
And
Go ahead.
sorry, and I'll just add in terms of data, on a totally different note. So, at Lamoille County Planning Commission, we've actually developed a watershed-wide model of the Lamoille River. And the data gathered from that modeling has changed how select boards view the river, what projects they've been willing to accept for mitigation. And it's all because they'll say, well, what if we did this? I'll say, okay, we'll model it and we'll show you whether that would work or not. And so really the data that drives decision making, and it's so important in these instances.
That's very cool, but we don't have time to talk about it now.
You're right.
We aren't the house. We can't spend all day on everything. We do morning and afternoon committees at years.
Okay.
But thank you all for coming, and it's really important to do that. And I would say to the other members of the committee, I think as we get closer to the time to put together the T-bill, we need to hear from more towns like this. So if you have towns in your area, please bring them forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't we take a 5-minute break?